It seems that in the past few decades, the market for anime has become abundantly oversaturated. Every year, countless series are born and die, with the successful franchises spawning innumerable spin-offs. Some give way to years-long weekly shows, others turn to film. Some even cross the border into live action. What's more, streaming services and distributors in the English-speaking world are more successful than ever, happily churning out localizations of any mildly successful anime property.
You wouldn't be blamed for being overwhelmed by the sheer volume of animation coming from Japan, and not knowing where to start. It's important to remember, however, that many anime are not being produced in this factory-like setting, meaning that there's still hope to find points of entry and notable projects. As we've showcased several times recently, modern anime producers are more than willing to produce original films which shock and awe audiences with their originality and how innovatively they utilize the medium of animation.
Released in America last week by Shout Studios and 11 Arts, Liz and the Bluebird is something of a marriage between these two extremes, the deep artistic one-off and the continual series. It's a challenging character portrait that pushes boundaries in how it handles its medium and subject. At the same time, it's the latest, but certainly not last, iteration in a long-running series which has just entered its 6th year. Liz and the Bluebird is in turn a fascinating look at youth, animation, music, and our relationships with our younger selves. Come along with us as we examine the strong points of this happy surprise.
Based on the multimedia franchise known as Sound Euphonium, which spans a novel series, a manga, and several anime television series as well as films, Liz and the Bluebird is one of the highest profile entries for the series yet. Up to this point, each iteration of Sound Euphonium has seen 2 showrunners. The novels and the manga were written by Ayano Takeda, while most of the anime was directed by Tatsuya Ishihara. With Liz and the Bluebird, however, the series was handed over to Naoko Yamada, known largely for her contributions to the anime adaptation of K-On! 2 years prior to today's film, Yamada also scored another hit with A Silent Voice, a coming-of-age tale dealing with the hearing impaired and adolescent bullying.
Given the shared ground between A Silent Voice and Liz and the Bluebird, Yamada seems to have shown her true strength with both of these recent projects. Even those unfamiliar with the other parts of the franchise will be able to follow along with Liz's slice-of-life drama that encapsulates emotionally what it's like to be on the verge of graduating high school. The film follows 2 leads, Mizore and Nozomi, who have been friends for the duration of their high school years. Mizore is something of a social outcast due to her inability to connect with others. Nozomi, her foil, is a gregarious young woman who charms everyone she comes into contact with. During their final school year together, the two cope with the oncoming end of adolescence and the big question that follows. What do they want to do with their lives?
The film explores this notion through the main conceit of the entire series, that being the school band and their journey towards greatness. We walk with Nozomi and Mizore and hear both of their sides of how the girls met, why they're important to one another, as well as their anxieties moving into adulthood. At the same time, this progression and the character development therein are mirrored in how the school band improves with their new piece of music, aptly titled Liz and the Bluebird. This music is in turn based upon a fairy tale picture book concerning a socially withdrawn maiden who becomes friends with a chipper girl who is in actuality a bluebird. As you can see, the theming and parallel storylines run deep in Liz and the Bluebird, being woven together like variations on a melody.
Again, it's like poetry, so if they rhyme, every stanza kind of rhymes with the last one. Hopefully it'll work.
Speaking of being woven like music, the soundtrack to the film and how it interacts with the various art styles of Liz and the Bluebird are truly something to marvel at. The score ranges from understated and minimal, merely providing set dressing to the unspoken drama in the film's early scenes, to soaring and bittersweet as the year progresses and the end draws near. The art employed throughout perfectly complements this, with several montage sequences which connect time periods of the film, feeling more like music videos than dramatic storytelling. Footsteps are synced up with musical notes, as though the film's soundtrack is being dictated by the characters' actions, rather than existing to highlight them.
The portions of the film are set apart, with the storybook backgrounds composed in what looks to be watercolor, and the real-world moments instead highlighted in a fine-lined, high-detail style. This suggests the differences in-universe between fiction and reality, in a way showing us how both run parallel to one another. Through the choice of art style, however, the film keeps the two separate, showing that they never directly interact beyond Mizore reading the book. Fantasy is able to fade off the page like the foggy visuals of watercolor, while the reality in which Mizore lives is harsh, highlighted by the hard-lined art style. The direction, both in terms of art and music, is phenomenal in its ability to maintain a melodic flow while still easily contrasting the two separate narratives.
This is also assisted by the relative lack of dialogue. Rather than over-explaining every piece of the duo's backstory or their relationship with the rest of the school, we are given hints through visual and auditory cues. All of the different grade levels seem to wear different colored shoes, which explains visually why they act differently between groups. A forlorn want to spend time with Nozomi is expressed in Mizore's arrival at school early, and disappointment when she encounters someone other than her friend. How the relationship develops between the two and their future paths is heard in the differences between band practices, one discordant and its follow-up in perfect harmony. These small touches take Liz and the Bluebird from being simply another tear-jerking coming-of-age tale and elevate it to a truly great film.
Perhaps the most important aspect to mention in this regard is that the film never provides the sense that it was written by a person too old to remember what being a teenager was like. For example, consider the post-release backlash to the quirky, unrealistic character relationships, interactions, and dialogue in 2007's Juno. Ellen Page and Michael Cera may have worked well as characters, adult projections of what teenagers are supposed to be like in the modern age, but not as embodiments of real teenagers.
In Liz and the Bluebird, all of the interactions and anxieties of these characters ring true to the experiences of young people. Consider the way you felt as a young person, eating French toast made by a parent on a Sunday morning, and how novel and exciting this was. Then consider how, as an adult, eating French toast comes with the stipulation that you yourself have to make it. It's become a task that must be completed rather than an unburdened, joyous experience. Liz and the Bluebird seems to walk the line between these two situations, as its characters grow from one side of this to the other. Minor characters worry that Mizore doesn't like them, given her repeated refusals to join their after-school gatherings. Meanwhile, Mizore is more intent on spending what time she has with Nozomi.
Other fears run the gamut as these characters approach the end of youth. We have both the up-and-comer who's ready to tackle life head-on, and the hanger-on who wants desperately to stay where she is for fear of what the future might hold. Both have a different type of foresight that only teenagers truly possess, unjaded by the mundanity of adult life and full of potential. Neither seem to consider that they could simply stay in touch online or via cell phone, as if these interactions are somehow less important than being physically together. Instead, Mizore insists that she needs to go to the same university as Nozomi. This is seen as a common trope in stories relating to kids moving between towns or growing up, that they say they'll stay in touch with old friends but invariably lose contact. Mizore recognizes this and attempts to nip it in the bud by ensuring that she and Nozomi can stay together.
Without patronizing the audience by pandering to how great their decade of adolescence was, Liz and the Bluebird instead looks at the commonalities in all youth. It perfectly captures that time in your life when you have so little experience that every little thing means so damn much. And yet the film doesn't celebrate this aspect of youth as many adults nostalgic for a time free of responsibility might. Rather, Liz and the Bluebird looks impartially and without judgment at these teenage years, providing us both the good and the bad, rather than a fantastical ideal.
Liz and the Bluebird is a sobering look at what it's like to be a teenager on the cusp of adulthood. It's dramatic, personal, and as bombastic as one's life seems at the age of the main characters. We wholeheartedly recommend that anyone looking for an emotionally affecting character portrait, or even just a good cry, give this one a look. The film is bursting with life between its gorgeous animation, its charming characterization, and its fitting soundtrack. If we had to put a label on the most cohesive project we've covered so far this year, we might just apply it to Liz and the Bluebird. The film is about the symphony of life, and it's complex enough to be considered something of a symphony about life.